Hi, I'm Courtney, and this is Janine, and we are two licensed therapists sharing skills and tools we use with clients every day. Today, we're talking about high conflict relationships. Picture this. It's Sunday night again. You're sitting on the couch, tension building. Your partner walks in. It only takes one look, one sigh, one sideways comment for your stomach to knot up. You already know where this is heading. Another argument, another silent night, or maybe both. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. And we're going to talk about high conflict relationships today.
We've both worked with hundreds of couples, parents, and co-parents who want the same thing, a peaceful life for themselves and their family, but keep getting stuck in painful conflict with their partner or their ex, their co-parent. Today, we're talking about what actually helps.
By the end of this episode, you'll have 3 concrete tools you can start using right away to calm conflict, communicate clearly, and protect your and your child's mental health.
We're going to share the research with you about how to aim for cooperation and peace in your relationship.
Well, let's start with what is a high conflict relationship. Janine, you and I, we just went to a training together, and they gave us an amazing example with clips from episodes, clips from sessions, and you and I walked out and said, are they really high conflict? We've seen a lot more. That's not a high conflict.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot that they were talking about high conflict couples because it didn't seem high conflict to me and to you. And so I guess we do need to define what that is. So we're going to look at the Gottman, the 4 styles of conflict. 2 of them we're going to kind of not pay attention to too much, but volatile and hostile. I think when those 2 are together, when people's pain cycles really mesh together and they hurt each other and we're poking at each other and hitting below the belt, we're in high conflict. When we can't get things done, when we can't compromise or collaborate, when there's just so much tension in the body, when there's so much frustration and anger towards each other, we're in high conflict. If we can't collaborate or negotiate, we're in high conflict.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I try to give as warning signs to couples, right? If we're name calling, we are high conflict. We're going in high conflict. If we're threatening the relationship, we're in high conflict, right? I mean, it's like, oh, but maybe we shouldn't be together. It's like, okay, well, this is not problem solving, right? We've let our emotions take over and we're completely dysregulated. So it's not just disagreement, it's that hostility, right? That rigid communication. I got to be right, like that one, right? Like what do we say? If you want to be right or have a relationship, right? So if you're getting into this, I got to stick to my guns and I got to win, you're at least verging on high conflict. That might just be conflict, but you're close. You got to watch out.
Yeah, and my marriage was high conflict for a while, a long time ago. And what someone told me, and I've just taken it with me forever, was they said, well, if you really need to win every fight, then you're married to a loser. Is that what you want? And I thought, not really.
Yeah, right.
So, how do I get to a place where I can find peace and not have to win all the time? And I don't know, that was a big help for me. When we're talking about co-parents, it's the same thing. They're trying to win, right? There is so much pain there and there's so much trauma that they're experiencing that they're trying really hard to win. And I think we're doing that when we're in families, when we're in partnerships. I don't even know if we're aware of it. I think it's subconscious. We're just fighting for us to be seen and heard and be right. And it just becomes untenable. It becomes unmanageable pretty quickly.
And yet I'm sure you've run into this because I know I have, especially with some of the co-parents and very high conflict relationships that I've met with. And sometimes they'll come in and say, we never really fought. Okay, but you're getting divorced. So what do you mean you didn't fight, right? Like, no, we never really fought. We just kind of let it go, right? That would be the avoidant to oblivion, right? So, so in relationship, it's not like, I would say my wife is higher on the disagreeability scale than me, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? I like disagreeable people, right? Because they challenge me, they push me, they sharpen me. If we can disagree, that's the difference between the volatile and the hostile, at least in the Gottman definition. The volatile is high energy, high engagement, but it's not hostile. We're not name calling, right? So, and I want somebody who's going to, I think, okay, how about this? It's better to be in a relationship with someone who's not just a pushover and agrees all the time. So learning how to navigate disagreement or how to come to agreement despite your enthusiastic desire for whatever it is that you want. So you really want what you want. You don't want to negotiate, or it's hard to negotiate. You want somebody who's going to push back. You want somebody who's going to sharpen you. But so often maybe our egos or our fighting styles or our words get in the way that we do become triggered, and it does become a high conflict situation.
Yeah, I think it's our trauma and living in the unconscious, right? Because it's the part of us that needs to be seen and heard. And when we're avoidant, especially, I think if we never fought, then no one ever showed up. No one ever took up their space and said, hey, here am I. This is me and this is who I am. This is what I want. And if neither partner ever did that, then they never really showed up to the relationship in the first place. But
Yeah.
then there's some people who are scared to show up to the relationship, and they're worried about what the other person might do if they show up and say, this is what I want, this is what I need. And that comes, I think, from trauma, either from past relationships or from childhood. We're conditioned to believe certain things about ourselves, right? Like we are supposed to be seen and not heard, or we're not supposed to cry, stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. I think that stuff is brought into our relationships. And then we start to be that same person where we're not supposed to be seen or heard, but our partner wanted to be a partner. They wanted a teammate.
Yeah.
They wanted a playmate, right? And if we don't show up, then what? So that both ends of the spectrum there.
I say this to get the attention of clients when I'm talking to them about relationships. I say, your job is to submit to your partner. They go, what? Right? And I say, no, submit like you submit a term paper, submit like you submit a time card, show up, be present, submit yourself, bring yourself to the relationship. It's not that you're giving in or, acquiescing or, always compromising and giving up things that you want. No, just let your opinion be known. Show up, fight. Right? We gotta disagree. We could say fight.
As a woman, I don't like the word submit. So I'm just going to step on your toes and say,
I use it.
I would rather just say, hey, show up, right? Take up your space in the relationship.
Mine turns into a lot more memorable, right? Because you go, my therapist said I need to submit, but I clarify it. I don't just say submit to your partner. And it goes both ways, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's still a stigma attached, and there's still some trauma attached,
Yes.
I think, to some people. When it comes to
that's
submit,
why I use it. It's memorable.
I don't like it.
I know you don't have to like it, but
It is memorable.
You're going to remember. I challenge you, Janine, you're going to use it in the next week accidentally. You're going to say, that stupid Courtney got in my psyche. Now I say submit to your partner. I don't like it. Right.
Submit.
So now, okay. So there's lots of research, right? There's lots of research about high conflict couples.
Research suggests that about a quarter of divorced parents fall into high conflict patterns, not because they're bad people, but because their pain and fear keep getting triggered. Kind of what we've been talking about.
And those are the people that I used to meet with, and that you meet with now, right? That's the 25% that can't resolve it through legal, litigious, lawyered up ways. Right. Mm-hmm. So if they're having a hard time even coming to those agreements, and the attorneys will send folks your way. And that's the 25%, the high conflict people who, even though I have I'm paying someone, whatever, $500 an hour to argue for me, still too much conflict for that setting.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I was thinking about my clients today when we were doing this, because we're talking about high conflict relationships, and that can be just partners, but it can also be partners with children, or it could be these co-parents, people that made humans together, but now are pretty, annoyed and irritated with each other, and are really struggling to find peace or find any kind of collaboration or negotiation. So I kind of wanted to talk about all of those today.
And I know when I've talked to parents who are in the process of divorce, and even if they're just not divorcing but they're living in high conflict, the one thing they're really worried about, the thing that matters the most in the process, they'll get through their own pain. They'll probably find somebody else to have a relationship with. It's going to be chaos for a while. But the thing that they're really, really worried about is their kids, right? But research shows that divorce doesn't harm kids. It's the exposure to conflict that people will carry with them from their childhood if their parents do get divorced. If you stop and ask somebody like, okay, well, tell me about your parents got divorced when you were younger, they're going to tell you about the quality of their parents' relationship after they got divorced, right? They'll be like, oh, well, couldn't invite mom to, the parent-teacher conference, right? And when I had my, baby shower, I had to make sure that dad was there, but mom wasn't there. And the graduation, I had to make sure they were sitting separately, right? I mean, so it is is how they conduct themselves, yes, during pre-divorce, the conflict, right? But
Right.
also how they conduct themselves during the divorce process and subsequently how they operate as co-parents that I find, and research finds, that has a high impact on kids. Do you see that too?
Yeah, and I'm thinking if that's kind of where you're finding yourself right now, whether in your partnership and there's high conflict all the time where you can't find your own peace, or you're in a family relationship where your kids are feeling that, whether you're getting divorced or thinking about getting divorced or just in conflict. This episode is not about blaming you. It's about finding and building safety for you to give you yourself peace and giving you some tools to try to step out of that cycle of conflict that exists. And that's what we're trying to do today.
So that cycle, right? I mean, we talked about it actually in our first show about the perpetual conflicts that couples have and the
Mhm.
solvable conflicts
Right?
that couples have. So when you find yourself in that cycle of maybe that volatility or hostility where it's, criticism, defensiveness, you're threatening the relationship, you're name calling, you just feel terrible, right?
Mhm.
So what we call that is the pain cycle. And then which comes from another part of the training you and I went to, which was the restoration therapy by Terry Hargrave. So a little bit on how it works, and Janine is more familiar with it. So I'm going to, learn a little bit from you today, Janine. So the way I understand it is how it works is you get hurt. That hurt activates fear and shame. Then you react in a way that protects you, maybe by attacking or withdrawing. I mean, that's kind of the basics of the pain cycle, but I definitely want to dig into it a little bit.
Yeah, we need to look at that cycle because that reaction that you have from your hurt triggers the same pain in your co-parent or your partner, or your ex or whoever we're talking about. And before you know it, you're both reacting to old pain, not the present problem. I think that's key because how many of us have been in a conflict and been in a fight and we're not talking in about 2 minutes time, we're no longer talking about what we were talking about. We're talking about everything else. We're talking about what happened last week and last year and 10 years ago and what happened, at Christmas or whatever. So I think that's why we need to talk about this pain cycle.
Yeah, say if it's hysterical, it's historical, right? So if we're having too big of an emotion, right?
Mhm.
Common day, we would say triggered, right? So you feel like you're getting triggered
Mhm.
into a bigger response than the situation deserves, right? So that's kind of probably the clue that you're looking for. So that's what you're talking about, like with the pain cycle, is that you just end up hurting each other in ways that are familiar, which makes the pain deeper and the cuts hurt more.
Right. So what I'm finding is, and this is just a story of my experience, I created a co-parenting group. So you can't be in the same group as your co-parent. And that's the only rule I have. You just can't be in the same group. But I do intakes with them individually. And so when they come in and they do their intakes, invariably they will say, almost everybody, the other is the problem. They are
Mhm.
the most horrible, awful human ever. And that's just the pain that they come with. But then I end up having two groups of pretty reasonable, rational people that I find, enjoyable in group. And so I'm wondering, like, what's going on? Why is this person being portrayed as the most awful, horrible human? And then also, I'm enjoying them in group and they're having insight and collaborating with the group. They're engaging. What's happening? I don't understand. And I started,
I gotta ask, do you when they come into the group, do you know who's partnered with who? Or are there times where you're like, you're sitting in my group, I'm hearing you, and that sounds just like the person that was described by your partner? Or is it more likely like you don't sound anything like the way they're characterizing you? Or do you not know? I mean, I'm curious, like, can you pick them out?
by the end of the second week, I can normally pick out everybody if they're in the same session as their co-parent.
Oh, you mean synchronous or like a Tuesday and a Thursday, not in the same room?
No, not in the
God
same
forbid.
group, but in the same week, 6-week session. If they don't have the same last name, if I don't know who they are, normally by the end of the second week of hearing the stories, I can put them together and go, okay, there we are. And I know, but I keep a really tight wall so that I don't know who the people in Tuesday are when I'm dealing with my Monday people.
Right. Because you don't want to, you want to come to each person basically clean. You don't want to walk in going, that's the SOB that does these things, right?
That's not fair. And I really believe that each person has the right to be in a safe space of non-judgment and be able to do their work if they choose to. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I kept and held a bias against anybody. So I let it be their story and I don't attach it to the other. I really do feel like each client should get their own space and time to do their work.
Yeah, and they're there for noble reasons, right? They want to do the best they can for their kids.
Yeah,
Right?
they want
I
to be the
mean,
best versions of themselves for their kids. So
yeah,
I want to be part of that. Like, sign me up.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we've established that sometimes we get triggered or we get hysterical. In my other example, right, is because we're attributing maybe thoughts or beliefs about the situation onto the current situation from the past, right? And that's because we get stirred up physically. We start responding with our biology and getting, tightness in the chest, difficulty breathing, maybe we're tense, our heart is racing, our hands are sweating, right? So we
Mhm.
have a physical response.
Absolutely. And we've talked about this when we've talked about relationships and other podcasts, and when we talk about anxiety. When our body reacts, we go to our amygdala and we get hijacked there. So we can only do fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We can't do rational or reasonable thinking. And we want to be rational, reasonable people, but when we're in that trigger state or being affected, and sometimes we are just triggered, our body just activates, our nervous system activates to protect us. And then we can't do what we need to do and to be collaborative or to negotiate well. So yeah, absolutely. And that's part of our pain cycle. When I feel unsafe, I try to micromanage and control. And when I micromanage and control, this is my pain cycle, right? My husband feels inadequate. And then when he feels inadequate, he then starts to overfunction and criticize and yell, right? Which makes me feel unsafe. So that's how this pain cycle works. And so we have to pay attention to that because we are escalating each other. I'm triggering him, he's triggering me. I'm triggering him, he's triggering me. Now we're both crazy when we both started out, pretty reasonable getting out of bed in the morning.
Okay, so it's a dynamic. Now, does the other person have to cooperate? Like if you're going to move from the pain cycle to the peace cycle, or do they have to cooperate? Or is this something that when someone becomes aware of it, they can use independent of their partner's responses or changes or lack of changes? Or does someone else both have to participate in the resolution of this pain cycle and moving it to a peace cycle?
Oh, man, could we do this job if it took two people for one person to find peace? Of course you can do it by yourself. Of course it's beautiful when two people are both doing it concurrently and doing that work. I love that. But yeah, it's all about that one individual finding their peace cycle and being able to step out of the pain cycle into their own peace cycle for their own mental health, for their own physical health, for their own emotional health. Of course you can do it by yourself because we can detach. We can get calm and we can ground ourselves and be able to hold ourselves in a way that says, whatever you do is on you. I'm going to do the best that I can in this situation because we go to our adult self. And when we can get to our adult self, right, we do fairly well there because there's no emotion to our adult self. So if someone can move from the pain cycle to the peace cycle, which I believe is true, we don't need another person to do their work for us to do ours. Let's talk about how to get to the peace cycle. It's when we speak the truth and we identify our need and we identify our values. So we have to recognize our pain.
Okay, so let's make this practical. Say your partner says, "You're never on time." Your pain reaction might be defensiveness, right? And you think, "You're one to talk." But my truth might be, "I value consistency and I want to feel respected." So you respond differently when you lead with the truth. So is that just like the difference? See, the first two examples of "you're never on time, but you're one to talk," those are you statements, right? And the
Mhm,
healthier one is the "I value consistency and I want to be respected." Doesn't
mhm.
make a you thing, and nobody else has to make that change. I can change my language, which will be more in line with the peace cycle.
Absolutely. When we're saying you, we are throwing arrows at the other person. You never, you always, you don't, you should. And then when someone's being attacked or feeling attacked, they're going to pick up their sword and their shield. And what we're trying to do is get people to put down their sword and their shield because it's a relationship. There's really no enemy here. We're trying to work together. We're trying to build peace. We're trying to build relationship and intimacy. And if we're in a family, we're trying to build a peaceful family for our kids to be raised in. So whether it's in co-parenting or in just parenting. So when you say you're the one to talk, or if you say that, you're going to then trigger the other person's pain cycle. But you moving into your peace cycle allows you to walk in your integrity. But it does take some effort because you do have to know what your values are. Do you know what your values are? Do you pay attention to what is your integrity? Is it honesty? Is it compassion, kindness, hard work ethic? There's a lot of different values that you can pay attention to, but if you know what your values are, then you can immediately go to an I feel statement. I feel respected or I feel disrespected and I value consistency. And when we respond out of the truth, it settles us down and it calms us, but it also ends up calming the other down that you're talking to as well.
So the idea of the pain cycle and the peace cycle is that you become aware of your own responses, that you can get out of the emotional reactivity and kind of maybe I say rise above or not be totally controlled by the emotional responses that you're having, is whether it's in the, well, I guess that's where the pain cycle is, right? So the peace cycle is more of a conscious awareness of something where you're not responding emotionally, but you're identifying those needs, those wants, those desires for the relationship and for whatever the situation is, kind of like boiling it down to the core, like, what do I want out of this situation, right? What is this argument even based in? How would I know, if I got what I want, right? What am I looking for? What do I need from this situation? Do I need to be told I'm right? Do I need to be told, that you're willing to compromise? Do I need to be like, what is it that I'm looking for out of this conflict? So sounds like it's more the beginning of the peace cycle, because the pain cycle almost seems like it's unconscious, or maybe it just goes on behind the scenes and we're not aware of it till we pay attention to it. And so when you bring that up to a client, is that what you're doing? Is saying, hey, this is how you work in this pain cycle. And once you notice it, then you can choose a different way of interacting?
Yeah, I think that's what we do is we bring the unconscious to their awareness so they can see it. Nobody wants to live in conflict all the time, but some people do. It's because they don't know a better way, they don't have a better tool. So that's what we're trying to do today is figure out how to explain that better tool. How do we figure out what we value and what we need? Rather than, oh yeah, well, you do it this way, and remember before you did it that way, and then you're just gonna be triggered by that, and so you're gonna come at me, and I'm gonna go back at you, and now we're just fighting like toddlers. And because, toddlers don't have any other way to get their needs met, but we're adults, and so we could go to this, hey, what I'm really feeling is I value consistency with the topic that you just used. I think we need to figure out what our values are and using an I feel statement. So we have to know what we feel as well, right? We're not just angry. We are something underneath that. We are discouraged. We feel deflated. We feel hopeless. Those are the things we're actually feeling under the anger. But let's talk about another tool right now when we're, maybe texting or using talking parents or whatever we have to do there in looking at the BIFF model, the brief, informative, friendly, and firm model. Tell me about that, Courtney.
Yeah, I like that one. There's the other model is kind of a gray rock thing, but we probably won't dig into that, because I think that the reason I like the BIFF model over that one is it does give you kind of step by step, like how to react, how to respond, or not react and respond instead. Yeah, brief, informational, firm, and friendly, right? So and I had a client, I was doing an intake, or a potential client, who I was telling about my work with couples, and I mentioned that I had done some of this, non-recommending, co-parenting, mediation, all the other whatever titles we want to put on it. And I said, so I've worked with, and she said, well, do you work with like not couples who are so hostile? And I'm like, oh yeah. I said, they're the easy ones. And I didn't mean easy. I just mean there's less emotional energy to push through in order to get to where you want. And it's because a lot of times the people that you're talking about that are doing the co-parenting are relegated to only writing things down, right? So maybe they're texting, but they're probably using talking parents, and they're definitely, using email, because this is all court admissible stuff, right? So they're worried about, the bad experience they might have in a communication, right? So it's definitely gets to be some like hostage situation on kid drop-off day, right? And so when we're boiling it down to just this, what I would call two-dimensional communication, where you're texting, messaging, those types of things, we lose a lot of our communication, nuanced communication skills, right?
Most of it,
Because
right? Most of our communication is not in texting.
yeah, I like this stat. I don't know how accurate it is, but it seems to make intellectual and emotional sense to me. 9% of our communication is the words we use. 36% is tone of voice, right? So if we're talking on the phone, we're getting the words and we're getting the tone of voice, but we're still only at 45%. So we're missing a lot, right?
Yep.
And the last 55% is facial expression and nonverbal, which is where the relationship message is carried, right? So now with these high conflict couples who are relegated to just two-dimensional communication, they're only going to be getting 9% of the communication. So they better do that well. And I think BIFF is an excellent model for helping people walk through what they should or should not respond to and how to do it so that they're maybe going more towards the peace cycle, right? They're processing their pain cycle, right? So they can respond in their adult or in their mature, wise version of themselves and not the emotionally reactive little toddler version. But we also know how to trigger each other, right? So we can pull each other right back into the pain cycle. And when clients and couples have gotten to this place of hostility where they realize they can't live together anymore, there's probably a fair amount of contempt for each other. And so it doesn't really even matter what the other person is saying. It's just that they're saying something just pisses you off. So guiding clients to use BIFF as a communication model is one of the things that we do when we work with these high conflict couples. So do you want to do an example of one?
Yeah, let's do a quick scenario. There's a lot of for co-parents anyway, and this is going to be, look different for parents or just partners, but I think this gives a good example. Okay, so the scenario for using the BIFF model, we have to show the poor model first. So your co-parent texts, "You're selfish for changing the pickup time again."
I'm selfish. I got a lot of selfish things I could do. Okay, no. Okay, well, I should respond. I want to respond to, "You're the one who's always late." But I probably shouldn't do that, right?
Well, I mean, we could just escalate and just be texting for the next hour back and forth about how terrible we both are.
That would not be fun. That would not be healing.
Would not be a good use of our time either, really.
Not really.
If we take the peace cycle and we take the BIFF reply, we might want to say something like, and we're going to take some time first, right? So first of all, this isn't going to happen in the 30 seconds that we're doing it. We're going to take some time. We're going to do some deep breathing. We're going to take a walk around the block. We're going to take a cold shower. We're going to do what we need to do to resolve the emotional response and the physiological response that's happening. But once we're ready, we can come back to it. So then we can pick up our phone again and we can go, okay, we're going to use the peace cycle. We're going to use the BIFF. So pickup is confirmed for 6 p.m. Thanks for the update.
That's much more neutral than I felt at the time when I got accused of being late or always being late, right? Something I find interesting, I don't know if you've run into this, but I've run into it quite a bit, is that people are using ChatGPT and AI to help them respond. So they'll upload texts. I had a client who said, "You know what? I was having a text conflict with my gal, and I got home, and then I realized everything I was saying, she was putting into ChatGPT and, characterizing me as selfish and, self-centered. And, so she came home and now I'm fighting with her and ChatGPT, who are mischaracterizing me. I've had other clients who use the ChatGPT function to upload and go. Now, a healthy way, right, would be you upload the conversation. You say, how do you make this a BIFF response, right? I'm having a real hard time seeing clear because I'm emotionally triggered. I'm in my pain cycle. Help me get some clarity and some distance from this. So I would think that would be a positive, as long as you run it through your own filter, right? You're not letting ChatGPT run your life, but it might be a help to get a perspective.
If you're acting in good faith, if you are trying to get ChatGPT just to be a friend that says, yeah, they're terrible, ChatGPT will do that too. It's just a tool. So what we need to do is be able to say, like, make this emotionally safe or put this in the BIFF model, and then you add your text. And what it can do is actually can teach you these tools a lot faster because it will calm it down. It will soften the language. It will give you alternative ways to communicate. And so after a while, you don't need to do that anymore because you've learned that to make something emotionally safe for someone else is appropriate and helpful for you so that you're not taking fire back, right? So I think that's important.
Yeah. So the way that you modeled the responsive, pickup times at 6 o'clock, thanks for the update. That's short, calm, boundary-based, right? Keeps you in control of your tone, stops the escalation loop, and really moves us from what have been a pain response to a peace cycle response.
It's important for us or important for the person saying it, and it can be helpful for the person that's receiving it. But one caveat here is sometimes we're impatient and we think if we do a couple BIFF responses, the other person should just get on board and start to trust us again and start to, get on board. Sometimes a conditioned response takes a long time to unlearn. So if we've done a lot of passive aggressive, we've done a lot of aggressive, we've done a lot of name calling, and we're going to try something different, give it time. Be gracious to the other person. They don't know what you're doing. They're probably sensing the first couple times as sarcasm. They're probably confused by it. So it takes some time to unlearn. And that's with co-parents, it's with parents, it's with just couples. If you're in high conflict and you're changing your ways, you have to give the other person some space to see it over time. That's making amends, right? We don't just apologize and say, oh, sorry, I'm doing it better now. We have to make amends because their body's going to be triggered and affected even by a good text because they're confused by it. They're wondering about it. And so I think that's an important point here in all high conflict couples. Can we be gracious with ourselves and can we be gracious with the other? And if you want to go a step deeper, Gottman's research shows that relationships improve when partners or co-parents learn to accept influence. This just means that you can try to find truth in what the other person said. Sometimes we talk about finding 1% of your responsibility in the conflict because sometimes it's difficult to, because we blame in our pain cycle sometimes and we try to control. So, if you can find the 1% of your responsibility and if you can find truth in what the other person is saying, that gives you some cognitive flexibility. It helps you to stretch your thinking to assume at least neutral intent. I try to teach my co-parents to assume good intent rather than bad intent. But if we can't get there, let's start with neutral intent. Let's not assume that they're doing something on purpose to hurt you. Let's say, hey, you know what? They're probably doing the best they can with the skills and tools they have. Sometimes they just have shitty tools and skills, so they're just doing their shitty best.
It's trying to switch it from malicious, right? That they're being malicious to at least like good. My goal is goodwill, right? Can we see some goodwill between the two of you? And I think one of the things when you're getting to respond is what am I trying to do with this communication, right? Am I just trying to establish the pickup and drop off time? Or am I trying to send a message to my partner about how broken they are and how they've hurt me? And in the example that we gave, it is about the time. That's all it's about. Are you trying to help the other person gain insight into their character flaws so they can be better? Might be a little much for a text that you're just going back and forth with, and they're probably not interested in hearing it from you in our scenario, right? We got to question ourselves, like what is my motive, right? If my motive is to push the other person down and to make them feel bad, and then as a consequence I'm better than they are, right? Then yeah, we could stay in our pain cycle. But if we want to move towards healing and move towards peace, right? I think isn't that what everybody's looking for in these situations? It is in the co-parenting situation, they just want the peace of mind that you're not coming around ever again. But, if you really break it down, most of the parents that I talk to don't want the other parent not in their kids' lives. They see the value of having both parents. They don't really typically characterize their partner as so evil and so bad that the kids shouldn't spend any time with them. So it's finding that, like, how do I help you be in the kid's life and make that peaceable as much as it can be versus I don't want you around me, but you could be around the kids. So figuring out how to transform that mindset from conflict and hostility to more of a collaboration is the attitude that we're looking for. Maybe not goodwill, but hopefully, right? And so often we end up in those sessions like interpreting. It's like, okay, here's why they said what they said. Do you hear that part? Right? No, I don't hear that. They're just accusing me of being, a bad parent.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's try to listen for it, right? See if we can hear it, because it might be there, it might not be, right? I may be overhearing,
Right.
Or ascribing positive intent to the other person when they don't deserve it, but maybe. Let's consider another option. Being in a high conflict relationship often leaves people feeling powerless, defined by the drama. But you can rebuild your identity. One of the ways is mindfulness. You gotta regulate your own emotions. You got to respond in your window of tolerance first and then communicate second, right? So you got to take that moment where you don't just fire off that text back, where you don't say that immediate thing that comes to your mind. You get in your window of tolerance. And when we talk about mindfulness and window of tolerance, we talked about that on a couple shows earlier, which the link will be in the description and probably on the screen now. So we'll direct you guys back to that spot if you want to know more about, how to implement mindfulness techniques and, what window of tolerance definition is. We also might, and we talked about this before in our anxiety episode too, where journaling and therapy can be a great way to process these thoughts and feelings, kind of figure out if you're in your pain cycle, how to move to the peace cycle, what's tripping you up, what's creating this big emotional reaction. So we have a lot of information on that in our previous episodes on anxiety.
All right, so let's summarize the big takeaways today. We went a lot of different places. I think one thing to remember that is conflict is normal. Staying in it isn't, and there's ways to get out of it. And then communicate for peace, not power. Find your peace cycle, step out of your pain cycle, and then protect your peace, protect your family by using some of these tools, the I feel statements, the BIFF method, looking at your pain cycle, understanding it. I don't know, Courtney, what's the last takeaway?
That one of the things I do with any couple and especially with high conflict couples is no fighting over text. No fighting over text. There's too little clarity in what they're actually saying, right? Because I can read the same text 10 different ways with 10 different emotions, right? So if I'm in a negative way, then I'm going to take it as a sarcastic, cruel statement. Right. So I think just making sure we're trying to resolve conflicts as close to face as we can would help us hopefully regulate ourselves.
But if you're doing co-parenting and you have to use talking parents, if you have to be on a text-based communication, make sure you're using the BIFF model or the nonviolent communication model where you are just making observations and you're just using the facts. Try to be friendly if you can, be firm with your boundaries, don't control the other person. So try to use a tool that can eliminate all of the unnecessary miscommunication.
So if you made it this far in the episode, hopefully you'll click the like button, subscribe, make a comment. We'd like to hear from you. Our call to action is to comment down below when you've used one of these tools or a situation where you wish you would have used one of these tools. So, and we'll be definitely living in the comments and happy to respond. We're not going to give you therapy, but we're going to pay attention and comment. That's for sure. We don't want to represent that we're putting out, we're giving therapy in the comments, but would really love to hear from you about what your experience is with these situations or with these tools that you've experienced before. So thanks for joining us on Two Therapists, One Couch. And until next time, we will save your seat on the couch.
Bye, Courtney.
Bye, Janine.